The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, they looked up at the night sky and wondered what secrets waited in the darkness between worlds. In the year 2347, they finally had their answer. The galaxy was full of life, full of empires, and full of danger. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of the HSS Unity, watching the massive Orion station grow larger through the viewport. She was 62 years old, with streaks in her black hair and lines on her face that told stories of 100 battles. But her eyes were still sharp, still burning with the same fire that had driven her to unite Earth's scattered nations under one flag. She was not alone. Behind her stood 4 women who had helped her build humanity's future. General was the oldest among them, a woman of 70 who had survived 3 wars on Earth before the stars opened up. She walked with a slight limp from an old wound, but her mind was sharper than any blade. General Lee was the strategist, a woman who could look at a battle map and see victory where others saw only chaos. She was quiet, always thinking, always planning 10 moves ahead. General commanded the ground forces. She was built like a soldier, tall and strong, with hands that had held weapons since she was 16. Her soldiers loved her because she never asked them to do anything she would not do herself. General was the youngest, only 45, but she had risen through the ranks faster than anyone in history. She was a diplomat as much as a warrior, able to find peace when others could only find war. Together, these 5 women had taken humanity from a collection of fighting nations to a united species ready to claim their place among the stars. The Galactic Council had finally recognized them, finally given humanity a seat at the table. Today was supposed to be a celebration. The Empire had invited them aboard their flagship for peace talks. They were the oldest species in the known galaxy, ruling over 200 systems with an iron grip. Their emperor had sent a personal invitation. It was an honor, the diplomats said, a sign of respect. Admiral Park did not trust it. She had learned long ago that powerful beings rarely showed respect without wanting something in return. But the politicians on Earth had insisted. This was their chance to secure humanity's future, they said. They could not afford to insult the. So she went, they all went. The flagship was enormous, larger than any human station. Its hull was covered in golden patterns that glowed with strange energy. Armed guards in ceremonial armor lined the docking bay as the 5 generals stepped off their shuttle. "Welcome, humans," said the commander who greeted them. His name was Lord, and he smiled with too many teeth. "The Emperor awaits." They were led through endless corridors, past hundreds of soldiers. Admiral Park noticed that the soldiers were not standing at rest. Their weapons were ready, their eyes tracking every human movement. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but there was nowhere to go. They were deep inside enemy territory now. The throne room was vast, designed to make visitors feel small. Emperor sat on a throne made of black stone, raised high above the floor so that everyone had to look up at him. He was ancient even by standards, his scales faded to pale, his eyes burning with cold intelligence. "The famous human generals," he said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "The 5 women who united a planet of savages. I have watched your species for some time. You breed like insects and spread like disease. You have no culture, no history, no worth. And yet you dare to sit among the great powers of the galaxy." Admiral Park stepped forward. "We came here in good faith, Emperor. If you have concerns about humanity's intentions, we are willing to discuss them." "Good faith," the Emperor repeated, and he laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You came here because I told you to come. You walked into my ship because you had no choice. Your species is weak, Admiral. You do not belong among us, you never will." The doors behind them slammed shut. Soldiers poured into the room from hidden passages, surrounding the 5 generals with weapons raised. There was no escape. There had never been any escape. "This is a mistake," General said, her voice calm even as soldiers grabbed her arms. The galaxy will not ignore this. There will be consequences. Consequences. Emperor leaned forward on his throne. Who will punish me? The Council, they fear me. The other empires, they serve me. Humanity, your species will be too busy weeping to do anything at all. He gestured to his guards, take them. The trial was a performance, nothing more. It lasted 3 hours. The 5 generals were accused of crimes against the empire, crimes that had never happened. They were found guilty, of course. The verdict had been written before they ever left Earth. The execution was broadcast to every human colony, every ship, every station. The wanted humanity to watch. They wanted them to understand their place. Admiral Park was the last to die. She watched her friends, her sisters in arms, disappear one by one into the white light of the disintegration beam. When her turn came, she did not beg. She did not weep. She looked directly into the camera and spoke her final words. Remember us. Then she was gone. Emperor's face filled the screens. Let this be a lesson, he said. Humanity will kneel or humanity will burn. You have 1 week to send your surrender. On Earth, in the command center beneath Seoul, Fleet Admiral Shin stood frozen before the main screen. Around him, officers wept openly. Some fell to their knees. Others screamed in rage, pounding their fists against walls and consoles. Shin was 60 years old. He had served under Admiral Park for 30 years. She had pulled him from poverty, trained him, trusted him with her fleet. He had loved her like a mother, like a sister, like a hero. The screen went dark, but her final words echoed in his mind. Remember us. His hands were shaking. His heart was breaking, but his voice was steady when he finally spoke. Close all channels, seal the borders. No ship leaves, no message goes out. We are going dark. His officers stared at him, confused and grieving. Sir, one of them asked, what are we doing? Admiral Shin turned to face them, and they saw something in his eyes that made them straighten their backs and wipe their tears. It was not grief. It was not despair. It was rage. We are going to war, he said. Total war. And when we are finished, the galaxy will never forget what happens when you murder our people. He looked back at the dark screen one final time. Mobilize everything. Galaxy waited for humanity to surrender. Every species, every empire, every trading company watched their screens and expected the message to come. Humans were young. Humans were weak. Humans had just lost their greatest leaders. Surely they would bow. 1 day passed, then 2, then a week. Nothing came. The Empire sent demands. They threatened to destroy human colonies if surrender was not received within 3 days. They promised mercy if humanity accepted their fate quickly. They warned of total destruction if they did not. Earth did not respond. Human ships stopped flying. Human stations went quiet. The colonies, scattered across 20 systems, sealed their doors and turned off their lights. It was as if the entire species had simply vanished. Other species began to whisper. The humans have given up, they said. They are hiding in their holes, waiting to die. Some laughed. Some felt pity. A few felt something else, something close to worry. Because silence from a wounded animal could mean surrender, or it could mean something far more dangerous. Deep beneath the city in a bunker that had been built to survive nuclear war, Admiral Shin gathered what remained of humanity's military leadership. The room was crowded with officers, engineers, and scientists. Their faces showed grief, anger, and exhaustion. Many had not slept since the execution. Some had lost friends among the 5 generals. All of them had lost hope. Admiral Shin stood at the front of the room, looking at the faces before him. He knew what they needed. They needed direction. They needed purpose. They needed someone to tell them that the deaths of their heroes would not be meaningless. I know you are tired, he said, his voice carrying through the silent room. I know you are angry. I know some of you want to give up, to accept that we cannot win against an enemy that has ruled the galaxy for 300 years. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. But I am not here to accept defeat. I am here to plan victory, and I need every single one of you to help me. Vice Admiral Myra was the first to step forward. She was 53 years old, a woman who had spent her career managing supply lines and logistics. She was not a fighter, but she understood something that fighters often forgot. Armies needed food, fuel, and ammunition. Wars were won by the people who kept the ships flying and the soldiers fed. I have run the numbers, she said, pulling up data on the main screen. We have enough resources for a sustained campaign of 18 months. If we convert civilian ships to military use and increase production at all factories, we can extend that to 24 months. But we cannot fight a defensive war. We do not have enough ships to protect all our colonies. Then we attack, said Commander. He was young, only 32, the youngest fleet captain in human history. He had been promoted after the previous captain died in a training accident. Some said he was too young for command. Those people had never seen him fight. They expect us to hide. They expect us to defend. If we strike first, strike hard, we take away their advantage. Chief Engineer Bay raised her hand. She was a small woman with thick glasses and oil stains on her uniform. She had spent 20 years building ships and weapons. I have been working on something, she said quietly. A new type of weapon. It disrupts enemy shields for a few seconds. Not long, but long enough for our weapons to get through. Admiral Shin nodded slowly. How many can you build? If you give me every engineer in the fleet, enough. The planning took 30 days. 30 days of no sleep, no rest, no communication with the outside galaxy. Every human military officer worked together, sharing ideas, solving problems, preparing for a war that would decide the fate of their species. They renamed their forces. The Human Defense Force was gone. That name belonged to a time when humanity only wanted to protect itself. Now they wanted something more. Now they wanted revenge. They called themselves the 5 Generals Vengeance Fleet. Every ship was repainted. Gone were the simple colors of the old fleet. Now each vessel carried the names of the fallen in letters of gold and red. The names burned on the hulls like fire, reminding every crew member why they were fighting. Admiral Shin visited the shipyards personally. He walked among the workers, shaking hands, sharing meals, listening to their stories. A young woman told him that her mother had served under General. An old man said that Admiral Park had saved his colony from raiders 20 years ago. Everyone had a connection to the fallen. Everyone had a reason to fight. We are not fighting for territory, Admiral Shin told them. We are not fighting for power or resources. We are fighting because they took something precious from us. They murdered our leaders and expected us to bow. They do not understand what that means. They do not understand who we are. He looked out at the ships being prepared for war, at the weapons being loaded, at the soldiers training for combat. Humanity does not bow. Humanity does not forget, and humanity does not forgive. On the 30th day, Admiral Shin sat alone in his quarters. Before him was a communication console, ready to send a message across the galaxy. He thought about what to say. Threats seemed meaningless. Words seemed weak. They understood only one language, power. So he sent them a message without words. The transmission showed 5 stars arranged in a formation, burning bright against the darkness of space. Each star was named. Then the image changed, showing coordinates, simple numbers that any navigator could read. The coordinates of the Emperor received the message on his throne. His advisors scrambled to understand what it meant. Was it a surrender, a request for negotiation, a mistake? The Emperor understood immediately. His scales grew pale, and for the first time in 300 years of rule, he felt something he had almost forgotten. Fear. Mobilize the fleet, he ordered, all of it now. But it was already too late. While they had been waiting for surrender, humanity had been preparing for war. While the galaxy had been laughing at the silent species, humans had been building weapons that would shake the stars. The silence was over. The storm was coming. And when it arrived, it would carry the names of 5 women who had given their lives for their people, 5 generals who had been murdered in cold blood, 5 heroes who would be avenged. Admiral Shin gave the order that would change the galaxy forever. All ships, all stations, all colonies. This is Fleet Admiral Shin. The time for hiding is over. The time for silence is over. The time for war has come. He paused, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. Move out. Across human space, engines roared to life. Weapons powered up. Soldiers said goodbye to their families. And the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled began its journey toward space. They were outnumbered. They were facing an empire that had never known defeat. None of them cared. They had names on their ships and fire in their hearts. They had 30 days of rage compressed into weapons and battle plans. They had the memory of 5 women who had died with dignity, asking only to be remembered. Now the galaxy would learn what that memory meant. Now the galaxy would learn what humanity was truly capable of. The Vengeance fleet was coming, and nothing in the universe would stop it. The border was supposed to be unbreakable. 300 years of defenses had turned it into a wall of death. Minefields stretched across millions of kilometers. Patrol fleets watched every approach. Orbital stations with weapons powerful enough to crack moons guarded every entry point. No enemy had ever broken through. No enemy had ever tried. Captain Han stood on the bridge of the battleship's Fury, watching the border grow closer on her screens. She was 48 years old, with short black hair and a scar across her left cheek from a battle she never talked about. She had served under General Lee for 15 years. She had learned everything she knew from that brilliant woman. Now General Lee was dead, her name painted in gold on the hull of this very ship. And Captain Han was going to make sure that name meant something. Enemy patrol ahead, her sensor officer reported. 3 destroyers, 1 cruiser. They're hailing us. Put them on screen. The face of a commander appeared. He looked bored, almost amused. Human vessels, you are entering space. Turn back immediately or you will be destroyed. This is your only warning. Captain Han smiled. It was not a friendly smile. I have a message for your emperor, she said. Tell him that sends her regards. Before they could respond, she gave the order. All batteries fire. This fury erupted in light. Missiles, energy beams, and kinetic rounds poured from every weapon port, tearing into the patrol before they could raise their shields. The 3 destroyers exploded in seconds. The cruiser lasted slightly longer, managing to send a distress signal before it was torn apart. Captain Han did not slow down. All ships, maximum speed. We punch through before their reinforcements arrive. The human fleet moved like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. They did not fight in careful formations or calculated exchanges. They fought like people who had already accepted death. They fought like people with nothing left to lose. The minefields were a problem, but Chief Engineer Bay had prepared for them. Special drones flew ahead of the fleet, detonating mines in controlled explosions that cleared paths for the ships behind. Some drones were destroyed. Some ships took damage from mines they could not avoid. Nobody stopped. The orbital stations opened fire with weapons that could destroy planets. But Commander had designed a formation for exactly this situation. He called it the Broken Star. Ships constantly rotated positions, damaged vessels falling back while fresh ones pressed forward, creating a swirling pattern that confused enemy targeting systems. A gunner would lock onto a ship, only to find it suddenly behind 2 other vessels. By the time he adjusted, his target had moved again. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Human chaos. The first station fell after 4 hours of fighting. The second lasted 2 hours. The third was abandoned by its crew before the humans even arrived. Vice Admiral Myra commanded the supply ships from the rear. She watched her screens constantly, tracking fuel levels, ammunition counts, and damage reports. When a destroyer ran low on missiles, she sent a resupply ship. When a cruiser took heavy damage, she ordered it to fall back for repairs. She kept the fleet moving, kept it fighting, kept it alive. "Reinforcements incoming," her officer reported. 200 ships approaching from the inner systems. "Tell Admiral Shin," she replied calmly, "and prepare the secondary supply routes. We're going to be here for a while." Admiral Shin received the news on his flagship, the HSS Park. He studied the tactical display, watching the red dots of ships approaching the blue dots of his fleet. They were still outnumbered. They would always be outnumbered, but numbers meant nothing if you were willing to pay the price for victory. "Signal all ships," he ordered. "We do not retreat. We do not surrender. We advance until we cannot advance anymore. Anyone who runs will answer to me. Anyone who surrenders will answer to the memory of our generals. Is that understood?" His communication officer's voice shook when she replied, "Yes, Admiral, message sent." The battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of constant fighting, constant death, constant destruction. Human ships burned. Ships burned. The space between them filled with wreckage and bodies. But the humans kept pushing forward, and slowly, impossibly, they began to fall back. Captain Han destroyed 17 enemy ships personally before a missile finally hit her bridge. She was thrown across the room, her arm broken, her face covered in blood. Her officers begged her to retreat, to get medical attention. She laughed through broken teeth and climbed back into her command chair. "General fought for 3 days straight at the Battle of Mars with 2 broken ribs," she said. "I can handle a broken arm. Keep firing." By the end of the 3rd day, the border was broken. 12 systems fell to human forces. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for centuries was bleeding, and it did not know how to stop. But Admiral Shin was not interested in holding territory. He had a different plan. In each system they conquered, human forces found something that changed everything. Slaves. Millions of beings from species that had conquered centuries ago. The insect-like creatures who had once been great builders. The four-armed warriors who had been reduced to servants. The small furry beings who were forced to work in factories. All of them remembered freedom. All of them wanted revenge. Lieutenant Commander No was assigned to liberate a slave facility on the planet Prime. She expected to find broken creatures, too beaten to fight. Instead, she found an army waiting to rise. The elder who met her was ancient, his shell cracked and faded, but his eyes were bright with hope. "You are the humans," he said. "We heard the broadcasts. We saw what they did to your generals. We wept for you." "We wept for ourselves," Lieutenant Commander No replied. "Now we fight." The elder's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. "Then we fight with you. Show us who to kill." Within weeks, rebellions erupted across space. Slaves who had been quiet for generations suddenly remembered how to fight. They used farming tools as weapons. They sabotaged factories. They attacked guards and freed their fellow prisoners. The empire was burning from inside and outside at the same time. Emperor received the reports in his throne room, system after system falling, slave races rising up, his border defenses shattered, his patrol fleets destroyed. He could not understand how this had happened. Humans were supposed to be weak. Humans were supposed to bow. "Send demands to our vassal states," he ordered. "Tell them to send their fleets immediately. The empire requires their service." His advisors sent the messages. They waited for responses. None came. The vassal states had seen the human fleet. They had seen what happened to the border defenses. They had watched the slave rebellion spread like fire, and they had made a choice. They were not going to die for an empire that was already falling. Emperor sat alone on his throne, surrounded by silence. For the first time in his long life, he understood that he had made a terrible mistake. He had killed 5 human generals to teach humanity a lesson. Instead, humanity was teaching the entire galaxy something far more important. Never give humans a reason to unite against you. Because when they come with everything they have. And they do not stop until the job is done. Prime was the heart of the empire. It was the oldest world under control, the seat of power for 300 years. Its orbital defense network was the most advanced in the galaxy, capable of destroying 1,000 ships before they could enter the atmosphere. Its surface shields could withstand planetary bombardment for centuries. Its ground forces numbered in the millions. No enemy had ever reached Prime. No enemy had ever dreamed of trying. Admiral Shin was not dreaming, he was planning. The Vengeance fleet gathered at the edge of the system, hiding behind a massive asteroid field. 3 months of constant war had cost them dearly. Half their ships were damaged. A quarter were destroyed. Thousands of soldiers were dead. But the survivors were harder than steel, forged in fire and blood. And they had allies now. Warships, ancient vessels pulled from hidden caves where they had been stored for generations. Warriors, freed from slavery and hungry for revenge. Saboteurs, small enough to slip through any crack and clever enough to break any machine. The coalition was strange and imperfect, but it was united by a common enemy. Admiral Shin called his commanders together for a final briefing. "We cannot destroy the orbital defenses from space," he said, pointing at the holographic display of Prime. "They are too strong. We cannot wait them out. We do not have the supplies. There is only one option." Commander frowned. "We land ground forces. Sir, the shields will vaporize any that tries to enter the atmosphere." "Not if we disrupt the shields first." Admiral Shin turned to Chief Engineer Bay. "Tell them." The small engineer adjusted her glasses and stepped forward. "I have modified the shield disruptors we used at the border. The new version is stronger, but it only lasts for 30 seconds. That is enough time to get through if they are fast enough." 30 seconds, Captain Han repeated. Her arm was still in a sling, but she refused to leave the fleet. "That is not much time." "No," Admiral Shin agreed. "But it is enough. We will hit them with everything we have. The space forces will keep the orbital stations busy. They will punch through the moment the shields go down, and our ground forces will do what they do best." He looked at Lieutenant Colonel. She was a small woman, quiet and calm, with eyes that saw everything. She had been General Park's personal, trained by the Admiral herself. She had survived the massacre only because she had been on leave, watching her daughter perform in a school play. That daughter was now safe on Earth, waiting for her mother to come home. Lieutenant Colonel intended to keep that promise. "Your objective is the Imperial Palace," Admiral Shin told her. "The Emperor must be captured alive. The galaxy needs to see him answer for his crimes." "Understood," Lieutenant Colonel replied. "What about resistance?" "Expect everything. The Emperor's personal guards are the best soldiers in the military. They have never lost a battle. They believe they are invincible." A thin smile crossed her lips. "They have never fought humans." The assault began at dawn, though there was no real dawn in space. Admiral Shin gave the order, and the Vengeance fleet surged forward like a tidal wave. The orbital stations opened fire immediately. Energy beams sliced through space, destroying ships in blinding explosions. Missiles streaked toward the fleet, detonating against shields and hulls. They threw everything they had at the approaching humans. The humans did not slow down. Commander led the attack ships in his broken star formation, weaving between enemy fire with impossible precision. Captain Han commanded the heavy cruisers, absorbing damage that would have destroyed lesser ships, drawing enemy fire away from the vulnerable transports behind them. Vice Admiral Myra coordinated the entire operation from her command ship, tracking 1,000 moving pieces and keeping them all in perfect balance. "Shield disruptors ready," she reported. "In position. Waiting for your order, Admiral." Admiral Shin watched the battle unfold on his screens. Ships were dying. His people were dying. Every second of delay cost more lives, but he needed the timing to be perfect. "Now," he said. The shield disruptors fired. For 30 seconds, the impenetrable barrier around Prime flickered and failed. 30 seconds of vulnerability in 300 years of invincibility. It was enough. 500 plunged through the gap, their engines screaming as they pushed beyond safe limits. Some were destroyed by ground defenses. Some crashed in the rough landing. But most made it through, slamming into the surface of Prime and releasing their soldiers like angry hornets from a broken nest. Lieutenant Colonel hit the ground running. Her soldiers were right behind her, spreading out in perfect formation, moving through the streets of the capital with deadly purpose. The city was beautiful, all golden towers and crystal bridges, but she had no time for beauty. She had a mission. The ground forces met them with everything they had. Elite warriors in powered armor, weapons that fired beams of pure energy, drones that hunted through the streets with mechanical precision. The battle was brutal and bloody. But the humans refused to die. A soldier named Corporal Moon took 3 hits to his chest armor and kept fighting until he reached the enemy position and destroyed it with grenades. A medic named Sergeant carried wounded soldiers to safety while bullets flew past her head. A sniper named Private Minu shot 17 enemy officers in 1 hour, throwing the command structure into chaos. They fought building to building, street to street, room to room. They had better weapons and better armor. The humans had something else. They had rage. Lieutenant Colonel led the assault on the Imperial Palace personally. The gates were guarded by the Emperor's personal bodyguards, warriors who had trained for decades for exactly this moment. They were tall and powerful, their scales shimmering with embedded armor, their weapons humming with deadly energy. "Surrender," the guard commander demanded. "You cannot win. The Emperor is under our protection." Lieutenant Colonel looked at him with eyes that held no fear, no doubt, no mercy. "I watched your Emperor murder Admiral Park," she said quietly. "I watched him kill the woman who saved my life, who trained me, who believed in me when no one else did. I made a promise that day. I promised that I would look into his eyes and tell him exactly why he was going to lose everything." She raised her weapon. "So no, I will not surrender, and neither will you." The battle for the palace lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Emperor's bodyguards were dead. The golden halls were scorched and broken. The throne room doors hung open, blasted from their hinges. Emperor sat on his throne, surrounded by the bodies of his final defenders. He was old, ancient even, his scales pale and his eyes dim. But there was still arrogance in his posture, still pride in his voice. "You cannot kill me," he said as Lieutenant Colonel approached. "I am the Emperor. I am the heart of this galaxy. Without me, everything falls apart." Lieutenant Colonel stopped before him, her weapon pointed at his chest. "We are not here to kill you," she said. "Death would be too easy, too merciful. You are going to live, Emperor. You are going to live long enough to watch everything you built crumble to dust. You are going to stand trial before the species you enslaved. You are going to answer for every crime, every murder, every atrocity." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "This is for our generals. This is for they died with dignity. You will live with shame." She signaled her soldiers. "Take him." Emperor was dragged from his throne, the throne his family had held for 300 years. He screamed and cursed and threatened, but no one listened. The heart of the empire had stopped beating. And humanity had ripped it out with their bare hands. The trial of Emperor lasted 7 days. It was held on a neutral station, far from both human and space. Representatives from every species in the galaxy attended. The dozens of other races who had suffered under rule. Even species who had been neutral watched the broadcasts with fascination and fear. They had never seen an emperor brought low. They had never seen power answer for its crimes. Emperor stood before the tribunal in chains. He was no longer wearing his golden robes or his crown of stars. He was dressed in simple cloth, like any common prisoner. His scales had grown dull and his eyes were hollow. The charges were read aloud: war crimes, mass murder, enslavement of entire species, destruction of civilizations, genocide. The list went on for hours. Witnesses came forward to testify. An elder spoke of watching his children taken as slaves. A warrior described the execution of his entire village. A mother wept as she told the story of being separated from her family, never seeing them again. And then there were the humans. Captain Han stood before the tribunal, her arm finally healed but her eyes still burning with the fire of battle. She described the murder of the 5 generals in exact detail. She spoke their names slowly, carefully, making sure the galaxy would remember. Park Lee, they came in peace. They were killed in cold blood, and the Emperor broadcast their deaths to the entire galaxy as a warning. She turned to look directly at. He wanted to teach us a lesson. He taught us one. He taught us that the galaxy does not respect the weak, so we became strong. He taught us that mercy is seen as weakness, so we showed no mercy. He taught us that our leaders could be murdered without consequence. Her voice hardened. We made sure there were consequences. The verdict was unanimous, guilty on all charges. Emperor was sentenced to life imprisonment on a barren moon at the edge of known space. He would spend the rest of his days in a small cell watching broadcasts of the empire he had built crumbling into dust. Death would have been kinder. That was exactly why they did not give it to him. The empire collapsed within a year. Its military was shattered, its economy broken, its vassal states freed. The golden throne sat empty and no one dared to claim it. Humanity could have taken everything. They had the power, they had the ships, they had the allies. The freed species would have followed them anywhere. But Admiral Shin refused. He stood before the reformed Galactic Council in a chamber that had once been filled with beings who looked down on humanity. Now those same beings watched him with a mixture of respect and fear. They had seen what humans could do when pushed. They never wanted to see it again. "We did not come to conquer," Admiral Shin said, his voice carrying through the silent hall. "We did not come for territory or resources or power. We came to answer a question." He paused, looking at the faces around him. When the Emperor murdered our generals, he asked the galaxy a question. He asked whether humanity would kneel, whether we would accept our place as a lesser species, unworthy of respect, unworthy of dignity, unworthy of life. His eyes were hard as stone. "This is our answer. We do not kneel, we do not forget. We do not forgive atrocities against our people. Harm one of us and you face all of us. This is not a threat. It is not a warning. It is a promise. It is who we are." He turned to face the representatives of every species in the known galaxy. "We ask only one thing from this council. Remember what happened here. Remember what we lost. Remember what we did. And never, ever make the mistake of believing that humanity is weak." The council remembered. A memorial was built on Prime, in the exact spot where the 5 generals had been executed. It was made of polished steel, shaped into 5 statues standing shoulder to shoulder, facing the stars they had died trying to reach. Park, Admiral of the fleet, who united humanity and led them to the stars. The eldest, who proved that age was just a number when wisdom guided your hands. Lee, the strategist, who could find victory in any battle. The soldier, who never asked her people to do anything she would not do first. The diplomat, who believed that peace was possible even with enemies. Their names became sacred throughout human space. Schools were named after them. Holidays celebrated their memory. Children learned their stories before they learned to read. And the galaxy learned a lesson that it would never forget. Lieutenant Colonel, now promoted to General, returned to Earth 6 months after the war ended. Her daughter was waiting at the spaceport, taller than she remembered, older than she should have been. "Mom," the girl shouted, running across the landing pad and throwing herself into her mother's arms. General held her daughter tight, feeling tears run down her cheeks for the first time in years. She had kept her promise. She had come home. "I watched the broadcasts," her daughter said, her voice muffled against her mother's uniform. "I saw what you did. You were so brave." General pulled back, looking into her daughter's eyes. "I was not brave," she said softly. "I was angry, I was sad, I was scared. But I remembered what Admiral Park told me once, a long time ago. She said that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being afraid and doing what needs to be done anyway." She touched her daughter's face gently. "She would have been proud of you, for being strong, for waiting for me, for believing I would come back." Her daughter smiled through her own tears. "She would have been proud of you too, Mom." Years passed, the galaxy changed. New alliances formed, old hatreds faded, species that had been slaves became partners, enemies became friends. But nobody forgot what happened when the Empire murdered 5 human generals. Admiral Shin retired eventually, living out his final years on a quiet colony far from the noise of politics. He wrote his memoirs, a simple book that became required reading in every human school. The final chapter was titled Humanity's Answer. It contained only one paragraph. "They thought killing 5 of our best would break us. Instead, it united every human who ever lived. They gave us martyrs. We gave them defeat. They asked if humanity would kneel. We answered with total war. And when the dust settled and the stars grew quiet, the galaxy finally understood the truth that our generals knew all along. Humanity is not defined by our weapons or our ships or our technology. We are defined by our love for each other. Harm that love, and there is nothing in the universe that can stop us from answering." He died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 93. His funeral was attended by billions, broadcast across the galaxy. He was buried on Earth, in a cemetery filled with soldiers who had given their lives for humanity. His gravestone was simple, just his name and 2 dates, but someone had added something else, carved into the stone in small letters. He remembered them. And so the story ended, not with war but with memory, not with vengeance but with love, not with death but with the promise of a future worth fighting for. The 5 generals smiled down from their memorial, facing the stars forever. They had asked to be remembered. Humanity answered.